Hello, friends of Studio Burley. This is Steve Burley, and it is coffee time. And I see Bale Barry in here and a couple of others. I am fired up. At least I feel I am fired up. So we'll see how it goes today. I've got some important stuff to talk about. So having seen my patriarchy card, I'm going to jump straight right into it. Because this stuff is, there's a lot of material here. I hope I can get through it all in a reasonable length of time. 1 second here. Here we go. First thing I'm going to talk about is some stuff about the coronavirus and Black Lives Matter. And this stuff is all connected. You know that. You guys have been following me long enough. The whole white guilt thing, white privilege, whiteness, coronavirus, dehumanization, Black Lives Matter, all of this stuff is connected. And here, I'm going to read this headline. I forget, I think this is in the Daily Mirror or something like this. Mayor de Blasio cancels all major New York City events, including the Feast of San Gennaro for the summer, except Black Lives Matter protests. Imagine that. Imagine that. This is far more important, of course, than our coronavirus stuff. Let's read on. This is de Blasio here, and a few critics have spoken out to condemn this, rightly so. There he is giving the announcement. Let's move on. A couple of quick points here. De Blasio canceled all events and requiring a city events permit through till September 30th. The ban includes also kinds of well-loved events and carrying on, except Black Lives Matter protests. So if you are into protesting, blocking the street, putting people's lives at risk, looting, beating people unconscious, and letting the police stand back, that's okay in New York City today. That's where we're at. What an insane upside down world it is. Let's carry on. And here he is, de Blasio. And this is no accident that he's supporting this. He's helping paint the BLM trademark on the road in 5th Avenue, New York City, right in front of Trump Tower. The symbolism of this, of course, is clear as day. And what is Black Lives Matter? You guys know what it is. If you've watched my video on Get to Know Black Lives Matter, it is a racist group, a feminist Marxist group, has nothing to do with the well-being of Black people, especially Black men, who they stomp all over and use for fundraising and nothing more. Let's read a couple of quotes from this article. The mayor explained that the exception was made for Black Lives Matter protests because the, quote, demonstrators' calls for social justice and racial equality were too important to silence. What a bunch of crap that is. They are not calling for social justice or racial equality. They're calling for power and domination in the culture. Read on. If you're just talking about health, we would always say, hey, folks, stay home if you can. But we understand this moment in history, people are talking about the need for historic changes. No, it's rioting and bullies and racism on the rise. That's what's on the rise. And you, coward de Blasio, are afraid to stand up for what is right, for stand up for equality, to stand up against racism. You are the present day lynches of the world. And that fellow who reinstated the Dixie line in Louisiana a century ago, you are one of them. You are a racist. It doesn't matter if you're racist against who you're racist against. If you're racist, you're racist. It's as simple as that. Let's read on. De Blasio also noted that more than a month of protests has not caused a spike in COVID-19 cases. And I do want to say a word about that. It hasn't caused a spike in COVID-19 cases because being outdoors in fresh air and sunshine does not permit the spread of COVID-19. None of us should be prohibited from going out to our events. That is what this is telling us. But no, the news stories all across and all these mainstream medias are saying that, they're implying that the protesters are more diligent at obeying social distancing. What a bunch of crap. They're pounding down people, they're stomping on their faces, they're punching them, they're looting in enormous numbers, banging against each other, laughing, spitting, crying, and drawing blood. That's what's really going on, you coward. And here he is painting this sign on Fifth Avenue. And we saw just the other day in the last Coffee Day session that they arrested a couple for a hate crime because they painted over one of these signs. This is the lunacy that's going on in our culture today. And of course, you can see Trump Tower in the background. I'm going to try and go through some of this stuff rather quickly because the main event is really important today, and that's the dehumanization of white people that is going on in our culture as we speak, in plain sight, with the support of the mainstream media and the support of the Democrats and the support of every left-wing nutcase in the culture, and right through the university systems, as you know. Reading from the top, a study published by the National Bureau of Economic Research in late June found no evidence of coronavirus cases increasing in 315 cities in the weeks after the protests first began. Research conclude that protests may have been offset by an increase in social distancing among those who decided not to march. What insanity. Maybe if they were real scientists, they would conclude, well, maybe the coronavirus does not spread outdoors in the sunshine and wind. Let's read on. While it is almost certain that the protests caused a decrease in social distancing behavior among protest attendees, they're not calling them rioters and looters, of course, and thugs, we demonstrate that effect of the protests on the social distancing behavior of the entire population residing in counties with large urban protests was positive. Positive. Get that, folks. It's positive to go out and loot and riot, beat people up if they're white people. But it's negative if you want to have a parade and celebrate your traditional culture or whatever event that you normally have this time of year. This is the lunacy that's going on and being spread and not even challenged. And here, there's a protest for you. And they even call it a protest. Protests in the name of Black Lives Matter have occurred consistently in New York since the police killing of George Floyd, a criminal, by the way, and I don't support him being killed. But let's not pretend that this guy is some kind of a hero. And all of Black Lives Matters, that people that they promote and jump and shout about, they've all been brutal, malicious criminals, or at least very violent, and their own behavior caused them to be involved in a violent incident, which caused their deaths. But here, what they're doing there is they're burning the American flag and they're raising the fist of Black Lives Matter. This is what they're calling a protest. Here, this a little bit diversion onto the coronavirus. This I tweeted last week, and I got some mixed responses on Twitter. I'm going to talk about it just very briefly. The coronavirus has killed about 500,000 people globally as of now. The even more infectious tuberculosis virus, or bacteria, I misnamed that, kills 1.5 million, 1,500,000 or more virtually every year. And yet there is never a quarantine for tuberculosis. This is not about protecting us. And there's a link to that video. You can find it on my Twitter feed if you want to watch it. The point being, and in 1997 or 98, I forget which it was, there was over 3 million people died from tuberculosis in that year. The number that die every year varies quite a lot, but it's a lot more than has been killed by the coronavirus. And these coronavirus estimates of 500,000 are likely on the high side because hospitals and health organizations around the world have been telling doctors, nurses, to categorize every death they can as coronavirus, even if there's not one shred of evidence that coronavirus killed them. So that's a high number, that's a high estimate of the number of killed by coronavirus, not a low number. Now, some people think that tuberculosis is different because we have a vaccine for tuberculosis. We do, and we have a treatment for tuberculosis, but it's not a cure. And people who are on the treatment often die anyways. And there's a person who just recovered from that tuberculosis who are living right here in the same condo complex that I'm living and moved into here to be more secure from the coronavirus because she is, for life, she will be vulnerable to infections of the lung because of tuberculosis. And she almost died of it. She is about 5'9" or 5'10", and she descended to like 65 or 70 pounds during the treatment for tuberculosis. Even with treatment, people die from tuberculosis. Even with a vaccine, people get tuberculosis and die from tuberculosis. The vaccine is only in the area of 60 to 80% effective. It is not a cure. This is an active, lethal, infectious disease, far more lethal, far more infectious than coronavirus. Far more. Look into tuberculosis and you'll be surprised. And yet we've been living with this forever. And there's never a quarantine. When there was a quarantine, and someone pointed out in the Twitter feed that there's been people that there are quarantines when there's tuberculosis outbreaks. No, there are not population-wide quarantines like we are seeing today. We've been imprisoned for this coronavirus. When there is a tuberculosis outbreak, they quarantine the sick. And the vulnerable who are near them, they are kept away and quarantined. We do not quarantine. I want to make this really, really clear here, and I'm sure you guys have heard this before. We do not quarantine healthy, free, innocent people. That's called prison. This is not a quarantine. This is imprisonment. This is getting you accustomed to staying in your home when you're told to stay in your home. I've thought about this over this quarantine quite a lot, and I've thought about I need to get back to Canada to do some things, but you know what? If I go back to Canada, there's a chance I won't be able to leave. What do we call that when you're not allowed to leave? We call that prison. This is what they're customizing us to. The tuberculosis vaccine and virus and all of these it's a bacteria, but it's an infectious disease, and that's the important part. All of these infectious diseases we've been living with for all of eternity, since we've been human beings. The coronavirus does not warrant even a fraction of the treatment and the response that we've been giving it. We're going to have to rebel against this someday, because they're going to start to clamp down and quarantine us whenever it suits them. They'll pop some fear-loaded virus out there, and they'll get us all imprisoned into their house for whatever reason, whether it's to destroy the economy and destroy the middle class, and therefore transfer all of the power over to the wealthy, or whatever reason they want to. It's warfare is what they're up to. This is a kind of social warfare. I want to pause here and recognize Rusky, who says, thank you so much for your support. I can't stop my drinking bender because you keep reminding me to do something I love every day. Well, I didn't say to drink yourself into a stupor. I have a nice drink every day as well, pretty much. Not absolutely every day. But don't lay that on me, dude. But enjoy yourself. James Burlow, thank you so much for your contributions to Studio Burley and support. James says, in 1969, the Hong Kong flu lasted till summer. I was 9 and got it. It was in the news daily, but life went on as normal. And that is the only way we can go on as normal. Do not accept this nonsense as the new normal, folks. This is what they want us to do. They're using these words, new normal. It's like newspeak, okay? And wrong speak. Newspeak, new normal. It's Orwellian. We're going to be living, humanity is going to be living with infectious diseases forever, forever and ever. Amen. If we accept being put in prison every time somebody in authority tells us there's a new danger out there, we will always be liable to be putting in prison for nothing. Let's read on. This fellow, Scott Taylor, pointed out that the woman Susan Rosenberg is a convicted terrorist. Now let's read this really quickly. She sits on the board of directors for the fundraising arm of Black Lives Matter. I think I touched on this before, but I wanted to remind people of this. She was convicted for the 1983 bombing of the United States Capitol building, the U.S. Naval War College, and New York Patrolmen's Benevolent Association. She was released from prison after serving only 16 years of her 58-year prison sentence when Bill Clinton commuted her sentence on his last day in office. Why would Bill Clinton want to do that? Why indeed would Bill Clinton want to do that? And here she is here, a convicted terrorist, a bomber, and she's on the board of Black Lives Matter. This is not, she's the board of the fundraising arm of Black Lives Matter. This is not a good group. This is not even a group about black people. This is a social revolutionary group, a Marxist group. And they're out to destroy us. This is another quote from the researchers say they didn't raise the number of coronaviruses from the protests. Now, tense protests erupt after Detroit officers shoot and kill a man who fired on them. This is what's going on. This is another, they're trying to keep this alive, folks. These are criminals. This guy, a 19-year-old kid, by the way, who's already carrying around firearm and shooting at police at 19 years old. He pulled out a gun, he shot at police, he lost the gun battle. He was shot. He was the aggressor, shooting at police. He was shot and killed. And what do we have? BLM trying to get the police fired for shooting back in self-defense. You can't make this stuff up. These people are telling us, they're screaming in our faces that they are criminals, that they worship, hero worship criminals. And we're accepting it. And mayors like de Blasio are accepting it and promoting it. They're cowards. They're nothing to us. We got to get rid of these politicians who are enabling these criminals and terrorists. Let's read this. Justice for Hakim Littleton. That's the headline. Fire and jail. The killer cop. Dozens of demonstrators chanted outside Detroit's 12th Precinct headquarters on 7 Mile Road near Woodward on Friday night. More than 2 hours earlier, police played dash and body cam video appearing to show Littleton drawing and firing on officers who were arresting an associate. They want the cops who took a violent, murderous thug off the street, who was the aggressor, and they want the cop punished for that. They're lunatics. Anybody who supports Black Lives Matter is a complete lunatic. And here they are protesting, screaming their little hearts out because some thug killer tried to kill a cop and lost. That's who Black Lives Matter is. Let's read this quote. The video is clear that the officer was suddenly and unexpectedly fired upon, he said. I commend Chief Craig for moving so quickly to release the video publicly. Friday's shooting at the site led to a call on Twitter for protests. Why is it that Black Lives Matter are trying to turn these villains into heroes? They are telling us that they want free reign to shoot and kill because they're black. They want not only police officers, imagine them getting away with that. They can shoot and kill police officers. They can shoot and kill innocent people on the street too then, because that's what they are. They're thug, violent, aggressive gang members. I don't have any pity for this guy getting shot at because he shot at police. That's self-defense. The police then did us a favor because he would have shot at anybody innocent. Now, let's get on to the main category here, and this is going to take a little bit getting through because there's a lot of material. I did a Google on white privilege, and what comes up? 176 million results on white privilege. And here, what does it say? The societal privilege that benefits white people over non-white people in some societies. And here, some of the results that showed up. Solidarity is not acknowledging your white privilege, but relinquishing it. Detroit Free Press. This white privilege that they claim we have. And the Scotsman, what is white privilege? The meaning and origins of the term used amid Black Lives Matter debate and why it's misunderstood. Yeah, it's not misunderstood. We understand perfectly well that it's part of the dehumanization process. Another site, how to talk to your family friend about racism and white privilege. Incredible. as if only white people can be racist. Read this from that article. We must remember that real learning about anything only actually happens when we are uncomfortable, Taylor explained. For white people who have been engaged in the ongoing process of anti-racist learning, I think it is very important that we actively commit to doing the work to support the learning and growth of our white friends, colleagues, and family members, even and especially when it is hard. These morons can't get it through their thick head that racism is endemic to humanity. All groups are racist, and it's part of the inherent in-group bias that all human beings have. That doesn't justify it. We need to stand against racist behavior and racism, but that we only stand against, let me be clear on this. We can only stand, and we are only standing against racism and bigotry when we are standing against all of it. If you stand only against racism of white people against others, then you are a racist, because you're singling out white people for a trait which exists throughout equally all of humanity. That's racism. These people using terms white privilege are racists. Let's carry on. And in The Guardian, Understanding White Privilege with Rennie Eddo-Lodge. Rennie Eddo-Lodge, author of the 2017 book, Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race, talks to The Observer's Nosheen Iqbal about global discussions on racism following the death of George Floyd. There's an author, you know she's a black author, she won't talk to white people about race anymore. Right there is a racist behavior. That there is racism. You, Rennie Eddo-Lodge, are a racist. It's that simple. Cal Matters, another website. Getting uncomfortable with white privilege and understanding the need for change. We're gonna finish up. Don't worry, folks. We're gonna finish up with a real sane and good, well-written article on this nonsense of white privilege at the very end of this session. So stay with me for it. The links are in the description of the video. Here, I Googled white guilt and immediately got 108 million hits. Let's have a look at some of the headlines. 22, this is Business Insider, by the way. 22 books on race and white privilege that will show you what's really happening in America right now. And there's the author, smug little smile and everything. You know that's racism right there. This and all the people who write and promote this idea of white privilege, white guilt, whiteness, they're racists. Here, New York Post, The Vanity of White Guilt and Other Commentary. It's everywhere in our culture. And here, The Undefeated, Dear white people, white privilege is a thing, and Rio was a perfect example. And they're hauling this up as this fellow here, I forget his name, top swimmer, swim with Michael Phelps at Rio, who made some big deal about some incident which didn't turn out to be what he said it was, and he was believed. And they're using this to mean that that's proof of white privilege. Well, what about Jussie Smollett? Jussie Smollett was believed even in the outrageousness of his stupid claim. And nobody's out there saying it's proof of black privilege. Why? It's exactly the same incident. If this incident is proof that there's white privilege, then Jussie Smollett is proof that there's black privilege. And same with that guy in the NASCAR, I forget his name now, some Bubba guy who claimed there was a noose, turned out to be a fraud. That's black privilege then. But this stuff never works equally. These people promoting these, true to their racist, bigoted, biased selves, they never apply the same conditions, the same requirements to other people. They only attack white people and defend all non-white people because they're supporting their pre-existing narrative that white people are the source of all evil in the world. This is the dehumanization of white people, and I'm just getting started. Here, whiteness. Put whiteness. This is incredible, folks. This is absolutely incredible. Put whiteness into Google, and what do you get? Whiteness studies. 13 million results. And the top one is a Wikipedia entry called Whiteness Studies. And just read that with me, if you will. If you have the stomach for it, you've got to have a tough stomach to watch this show. Whiteness Studies is a study of the structures that produce white privilege with, and then there's some other stuff I got cut off there. In any case, that says enough right there. Whiteness Studies is the studies of the structures that produce white privilege. I was going to mention this later on, but it's on my mind right now. I'm going to mention it right now. These people who create white guilt, white privilege, whiteness, these are the social constructionist theory people, okay? And what they are actually doing is disguising the fact that they are socially constructing institutionalized hatred and racism against white people, and they're doing it right before our eyes. This smokescreen of white studies, white guilt, white privilege is hiding the fact that they are actively socially constructing institutionalized hatred and racism against white people right before our eyes, and they are succeeding. They are succeeding. We can turn this around. I'm not going to say that we can't, but I'm saying that they're just getting started. This is the battle between good and evil that is growing in our world today. Epic times. Humanity reaches epic times regularly. We are reaching one now, and it's not what Black Lives Matter think. Black Lives Matter are on the side of evil. They're creating a new racist state. At least they're trying to. I put blackness into Google. And what did I get? Well, about the same number of results, but the top and none of the results are distinctly different. Blackness, read it with me. Blackness may refer to the property of being black color in general. Blackness, the amount of ink on a page. Nothing racist, nothing trying to attack a people. But whiteness brings up pure, unadulterated, unashamed, racist hatred against white people. There's no way to avoid this conclusion. Here's the Wikipedia entry on blackness. Okay, the property, a very rational, what you would expect under whiteness. It is exactly what you should be seeing under whiteness, but we don't. We have institutional, socially condoned racism in place right through the Western world now. These feminist bigots who have entrenched themselves in the university systems for the last 50 years have brought this about. I'm going to pause here for a moment and recognize Harry Holbrook. Thank you for supporting Studio Brûlé, Harry. And Harry says, college changed my mindset of loving all to hating all people equally, but the emphasis on hatred of all white and Western. Well, the universities play the decisive roles. The education system is largely responsible for the acceptance of this new form of racism, this one and only acceptable racism in our culture. It's coming directly from women and gender studies feminists in the universities. Let's read on. Here again, the Cambridge Dictionary. Blackness, the quality of being very dark or an area of darkness. Okay, there you go. The same thing in Macmillan. And again, okay, in this one they say blackness and whiteness are racial categories that have existed. Okay, they recognize that they are racial categories equally, but they don't call whiteness the embodiment of racism, because that's what's going on right now. Whiteness and white people are being labeled permanently as a hate group, as a white supremacist group, simply for being born. And here, some articles that come up. In Stand, understanding whiteness. Imagine that, understanding blackness, and then talking about all the crime that goes on in the ghettos. You would never see it. You would never see all that crime attached to the very unchangeable fact that you are black. But you are going to see all of this unforgivable sins attached to the fact that you are white. The language here matters, and I'm going to demonstrate just how important this language is and how it has been slipping into dehumanizing for over 100 years now. To combat racism today, it is necessary to understand the history of the ideology of race in order to challenge the whiteness as the foundation of racial categories and racism. Whiteness, another one. And this is from the National Museum of African American History and Culture. Okay? This is the National Museum. Whiteness. Since white people in America hold most of the political, institutional, and economic power, they receive advantages that non-white groups do not. And I'm going to read you an article that puts this lie to this with no uncertain terms at the end of this session. It is a lie, and yet it is accepted. This is pure feminist, university feminist professor crap that is accepted widely, top to bottom, from shallow to deep, from side to side. This is accepted and promoted throughout our culture, in every institution, in all the media. And it's a lie. Let's read on. Even psychology today, although I shouldn't say even, because psychology, the whole field of psychology is dominated by feminists. They're all trained in this racist theory. They're all trained by the racist feminists, the bigoted, sexist, racist feminists that dominate our university systems. What is whiteness? Should people be proud of membership in a group marked by power and privilege? There's no critical analysis of any of this. It's all accepted as if everybody knows the sun rises in the east. Nobody's critical of this. This is the equivalent of flat earth stuff, folks. I hope there's no flat earthers in my audience today. I'm totally against the flat earth thing. But it is the equivalent of flat earthers. There is no evidence for it. So they come up with theory after theory and convoluted, twisted rationalizations, ignoring the evidence to the contrary, to maintain their ideological purity that it is whiteness that causes all the problems in the world. Here, the social construction of whiteness, racism by intent, racism by consequence. The University of Missouri. And she concludes, I argue that mainstream America manifestly benefited in the past and benefits today from the profit made by the use of hundreds of years of free labor and thus low production costs. It was the labor and production nearly system of early slavery that produced the efficient method of capital investment and production. Keeping the labor costs low allowed for the creation of wealth based on capital investment, the ownership of real estate, the ownership of human beings categorized as property. This is an abject lie. It's been proven to be false many, many times. And slavery ended long before the U.S. became prosperous. The U.S. is the most prosperous country in the world after World War II. A lot of the history of the U.S. is the history of poor people struggling to stay alive. And yet they dismiss all of this. They dismiss all of this. They don't consider the fact, like Dispatcher is saying here, that Africa had slaves for millennia. Slavery has been a part of humanity forever. Forever. Every group of humans has owned slaves. Every category of humans have sold slaves. Every category of humans have been slaves. Even white people. Yes, I know it's a shock to learn this for a lot of people, but yes. And the reality of the fact is that as white people were the only group in history, in human history, to actively put an end to slavery. But that's not mentioned either. The first country to do so was England, and the U.S. was soon to follow. Whiteness by Cara, whatever, these two people. Another study on whiteness. Let's read that. Scholars of whiteness, however, turn their attention to the myriad ways This fictional social construction works to reinforce white power, privilege, and white wealth at every level every day. Institutional and global experience, notably through the term, invokes ideas related to skin color. Whiteness refers more specifically to a structural position, that is, to a racialized social identity that is positioned as superior relative to other races within a system of racial hierarchy. Then why do they use the term whiteness? They are lying to you right here. They're putting up the smoke and mirrors. If it's that, why use whiteness to describe it? No, because they want people to hear white. They want all of this to be associated to white. This is racism through and through. Let's read on. Indeed, because race is socially constructed and not biological, whiteness can be understood as a result of social and cultural processes rooted in a global history of European colonialism and blah, 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 blah. Whiteness embodies both a material reality connected to the disproportionate blah, blah, blah. They didn't pick whiteness for no reason. They picked this term because they want it to attach to white people. If they didn't want it attached to white people, they would have picked a different term. And this is their plausible deniability. They're building a defense against this very accusation that I'm making against them right now, that they are racists and that they intend to attach all of the negative aspects of our culture and humanity onto white people. They are creating a defense for creating a socially constructed, institutionalized hatred of white people. And feminists have never really hidden this. Feminists have been screaming their hatred of men and white men in particular from the tops of rooftops for over 50 years, maybe more. But it really got into high gear over 50 years ago. This from CSUSM, Ask the Expert, the problem with whiteness. And this was just June of this year. Now I'm going to get into, this is an example of how absurd this gets. And Janice tweeted on this particular event that's coming up, race. And this is a dinner that white people, I presume white women, can buy expensive tickets to go there and be told how terrible they are for being white women. Isn't this amazing? This is the kind of incredible racism that is growing like weeds in our culture today. White women, let's talk about racism and your complicity. Reading from the top. Our mission is simple. Reveal the naked truths about racism in America and unleash your power as white women to dismantle it. This isn't the stuff of Trump, the KKK, and Nazis. That's easy. It's obvious, and denouncing it requires almost nothing of white folks. Notice they throw Trump in there, belying the fact that this is really a leftist Democrat movement. All of it. Trump has nothing in common with KKK and Nazis. Trump is our only hope for preventing our culture from sliding into even more chaos and destruction. Let's read on. Looking at yourself in the mirror and acknowledging that as a white person in America, you are an active participant in upholding white supremacy. This isn't personal. Man, you got to read that over again. Your color of your skin makes you a white supremacist. And then they're going to tell you to your face that it isn't personal. Folks, I mean, it's the clown world. I can't even believe I have to read this stuff out loud. That the fact that somebody has the nerve to write this crap. Let's read it again. Looking at yourself in the mirror and acknowledging that as a white person in America, you are an active participant in upholding white supremacy. But this isn't personal, she says. What a dimwit. It's incredible. I'm going to pause here and acknowledge James Burlow. Thank you so much for your support to Studio Relay, James. And James says, YouTube is blocking messages about BLM protester killing W woman July 5th. Why not in the news? I don't know. I'm not aware of that. If you can put some links in the comment section, I'd be appreciated. Thank you, James. Let me carry on with this stuff here. Black, Indigenous, and other people of color are on the receiving end of white supremacy, while white people, white women, you are on the giving end. The arrogance, the racism in this group and in their statements is unbelievable. It's absolutely unbelievable. You are on the receiving end of white supremacy, while white people, white women, you are in the giving end. I have never seen evidence of white supremacy in my life in the US and Canada. Not seen it. I'm not saying that these groups are there, but they are very fringe, they're very hidden, and they have no power. Zero power, zero influence over the culture, anywhere in the culture. Prove me wrong. Show me where these white supremacists have power in our culture today. And James again says, thank you again, James, can't say certain words. Okay, oh, white women was killed? Is that what you're saying? I don't know. I'm not familiar with the incident whatsoever. So if anybody has any information or links on that, please do share it. Let's read in the top. Again, this is with this group who want white women to pay to be screamed at for being white supremacists when they're totally innocent. Reading from the top. This is an intimate, direct conversation about how the white women at the table are complicit in the continued injustices of our white supremacist society and how they can immediately take action. White women attending these dinners need to be committed to resisting white defenses, and the host is prepared, read this, the host is prepared to interrupt white fragility so as not to derail the conversation. In other words, you're going to be screamed at, insulted, and accused of things you're not guilty of throughout dinner. You're going to pay for it. And if you happen to have a word in your own defense, they're going to shut you up in public in front of everybody there. Can anybody tell me you've ever seen anything so stupid or ignorant or racist and bigoted in your life? And just read this. The presumption that we have a white supremacist society is arrogance in the extreme. These people have given up even the pretense of having evidence for anything they claim. Even the pretense. And James, I believe, put another comment up here at your, and again, thank you for your support, James. Look up BLM protester kill woman in Indianapolis protest. Okay, we'll have a look at that later. And let's continue on with this. Oh, I have to get this off the screen. Sorry about that, folks. Okay, that is my session on whiteness, but it's not the end of our session on dehumanization here. I'm just going to make sure I got all that I did. Now, in Vox, they put it in an article. I just got one little quote from it because they go off into all crazy land here with their dehumanization, claiming that Trump and blah, 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 KKK in this article are dehumanizing others in our culture. But in any case, you can read it. The link's in the description. The dark psychology of dehumanization explained. Let's have a look. And this is from the Vox article. We have this incredible capacity for cooperation. It's what makes us human in many ways, Catelli says. And yet we have this capacity for othering. Yes, we do. And the cooperation that's going on right now is the cooperation of the overwhelming majority of the people in our culture to create a racist group, a racist response, racism and hatred of white people. That's what they're cooperating about right now. We are cooperating, not we, not me and you, but the majority of our culture is cooperating in the self-destruction of that same culture. Let's read on. You can think of human psychology as a series of overlapping mental programs. One program identifies faces as individuals we recognize. Another is working memory, which allows us to make quick calculations in our head. And this is where they say the, oops, I just lost power here. I hope you can still see me. I'm going to continue on. It looks like I've still got internet. Let's read on here. Noor Kelly is a psychologist at Northwestern University whose research is about understanding one of the darkest, most ancient, and most disturbing mental programs encoded in our minds, dehumanization, the ability to see fellow men and women as less human. And they're saying this amounts to identifying rival groups who may want to destroy you. That's the process of dehumanizing when you see them on the horizon coming after you. There may be some truth to that. Let's read on. Dehumanization doesn't only occur in wartime, says Nick Haslam, a psychologist who is the world's current leading expert on the topic. It's happening right here, right now, every day. Good people who don't see themselves as being prejudiced bigots are nevertheless falling prey to it. Dehumanization is a mental loophole that lets us harm other people. And these people, these very people, the authors at Vox, and unwittingly, in their article, are doing this exact same thing. They are blaming whiteness and white people. They are dehumanizing white people. And then they're in this article, they're actually claiming that the dehumanizing is going on against Muslims, I think, in this one, which may have happened in that period of time after the 9/11. I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm not saying that whiteness is the only target for dehumanization in our culture, but we are the hugest target right now, the biggest target. Let's read on. Dehumanization, what is it? This is from the Wikipedia. Dehumanization is the denial of full humanness to others and the cruelty and suffering that accompany it. And this is what's going on when they use terms like white guilt, white privilege, and whiteness. They're taking away your humanity. You're not an individual anymore. You're one of those those carriers of white privilege. You're one of those people who are perpetuating this evil of whiteness in our culture. This is exactly what dehumanization is. And in language, read this. Dehumanization and dehumanized perception can occur as a result of language. Well, I cut off the rest there. I don't remember what it is. But it is the result, can occur as a result of language. And they know this. These people who are creating terms like white guilt, white privilege, and whiteness to describe things which are not related to individuals, and then defending themselves saying, oh, well, we're just describing characteristics of the culture. They know the language. They study linguistics. All of those people putting those theories forth study this exact thing. They know the power of using the word like whiteness, the power that has in the minds of the public. It is a dehumanization process. Let's read this from the top. Dictatorships use the same process to prevent opposition by citizens. Such efforts often depend on pre-existing racist, sectarian, or otherwise biased beliefs. This is what feminists have been 50 years or 60 years doing. Biased beliefs, which governments play upon through various types of media, presenting enemies as barbaric and undeserving of rights. That's exactly what they're doing with white privilege, white guilt, and whiteness today. They've gone from the evil of patriarchy to white guilt, to white privilege, and now it's just whiteness. And in the media, every day in the mainstream media, they are putting out more and more stories presenting whiteness as the enemy. And they're having dinners for you to decry your whiteness. This is going throughout our culture, folks. It is as plain as day. It is, you have to be blind not to see it, and yet the majority in our culture are going along with it. Let's read this. The Holocaust during World War II and Rwandan genocide have both been cited as atrocities facilitated by a government-sanctioned dehumanization of its citizens. That's what's going on. De Blasio, in siding with BLM, is saying clearly to his supporters in New York that whiteness is the problem. And what are we seeing? We're seeing people being beaten half to death for being white. It's working, and it's supported by our government. Our governments are sanctioning dehumanization of white people. It came from our education system, from our universities. It's paid for by our tax dollars. In terms of the Holocaust, government proliferated propaganda created a culture of dehumanization of the Jewish. How is that different than dehumanization of white people today? It is not. Anthropologists Ashley Montagu and Floyd Matson famously wrote that dehumanization might well be considered the fifth horseman of the apocalypse because of the inestimable damage it has dealt to society. When people become things, the logic follows, they become dispensable, and any atrocity can be justified. Let all that sink in, folks. Let all that sink in. I think I have one more quote here. The 1960s terrorist group Weather Underground had advocated violence against any authority figure and used the police are pigs idea to convince members that they were not harming human beings but simply killing wild animals. This is why they're creating and proliferating these terms like whiteness. They want to attach the bad elements of our culture to whiteness. And then, of course, it's up to the crowds of people to accept that white and whiteness are really not that much different. That's the language, the use of the language. Now, I want to talk now. I want you to remember that term here, just a little bit back here, because this is really important. In the use of language, and how it's supported in the media and in our government and in our culture, how the use of language slowly changes, like patriarchy transformed into white guilt and white privilege. Of course, it was men at first, and then it ultimately turns into whiteness. We're going to have a look at how we came to have human resource management. I want you to think very carefully about this term. And I remember when they changed the name of the department from employee relations to human resource management. I'm going to give you a hint as to where this is going. You probably see it already. Employee relations. That used to be the name of human resource departments when I first started work. Employee relations. In other words, employee is a person, and the company has a relationship with their employees, their people. This was a perfectly good term, but they changed it to human resource management. Now, you're human resource. You are not an employee now, you're a resource. Didn't we just see the dehumanization process a little bit, just a moment ago, that, I'll go back here a bit. When people becomes things, just read this over again. When people become things, the logic follows, they become dispensable, and any atrocity can be justified. We have seen the change to human resources. Resources are a thing. Resources are a thing. They're not an individual. An employee was an individual. Employee relations. A resource is a thing. And this is exactly what they were talking about and warning about. Let's read this quote. HR is the strategic approach to effective management of people in a company or organization such that they help their business gain a competitive advantage. It is designed to maximize employee performance in service of an employer's strategic objectives. Let's read on here. The overall purpose of human resources is to ensure that the organization is able to achieve success through people. HR professionals manage the human capital of an organization and focus on implementing policies and processes. History of this. Let's look at the history of the Human Resources Department. The human resources field began to take shape in 18th century Europe. It built upon a simple idea by Robert and Owen and Charles Babbage. Charles Babbage is credited as producing the first computer, by the way, a machine, during the Industrial Revolution. These men concluded that people were crucial to the success of an organization. They expressed the thought that the well-being of employees led to perfect work. Without healthy workers, the organization would not survive. So far, so good. Probably was a good idea at that time, even revolutionary. Now, influenced by Frederick Taylor. Taylor explored what he termed scientific management, sometimes referred to as Taylorism, striving to improve economic efficiency in manufacturing jobs. Notice that it was called Taylorism at that point in time. Taylorism. Unexpected problems among soldiers, which had alarmed generals and politicians in the First World War, co-founded the National Institute of Industrial Psychology, NIIP, in 1921. In doing so, he set seeds for the human relations movement. This is the movement, not what it was called back then. We're calling it the movement today. This movement on both sides of the Atlantic built on the research of Elton Mayo and others documented through the Hawthorne studies. Now remember, this is called Taylorism at this time. Taylorism. Birth and development of the discipline. By the time enough theoretical evidence existed to make a business case for strategic workforce management, changes in the business landscape by Andrew Carnegie and Rockefeller, and in public policy, had transformed the employer-employee relationship, and the discipline became formalized as industrial and labor relations. And let's go on. In 1913, one of the oldest known professional HR associations, the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, started in England as the Welfare Workers Association. It changed its name a decade later to the Institute of Industrial Welfare Workers, and again the next decade to the Institute of Labor Management, before settling upon its current name in 2000. Now it is Human Resources. It's always struck me that human resources was very darn close to livestock. Oh, geez, I'm not going to read all that. Let me get ahead here. I should. I think there's something important in there I wanted to point out. Let me back up. Okay, let's back up here. Likewise, in the United States, this is where the name in 2000 in Britain turned to HR, like human resources. Likewise, in the United States, the world's first institution of higher education dedicated to workplace studies, the School of Industrial and Labor Relations formed at Cornell University in 1945. In 1948, what would later become the largest professional HR, Human Resources Association, the Society for Human Resource Management, formed as the American Society for Personnel Administration. So it started out as ASPA, the American Society for Personnel Administration. Personnel, people, human resources. It's an entirely different thing. In the Soviet Union, meanwhile, Stalin's use of patronage exercised through the Human Resource Department equivalent in the Bolshevik Party, its Orgbureau, demonstrated the effectiveness and influence of human resource policies and practices, and Stalin himself acknowledged the importance of the human resource, such as in his mass deployment of the Gulag system. And in Canada, and I suspect in the US as well, our government actually has a Department of Human Resources. And those human resources that they're referring to are the Canadian citizens. For as far as the government is concerned, the government, which is promoting this language, including whiteness and the objectification and the dehumanization of humans, they use the term human resource as well. The same term used by Stalin in a similar way. The Gulag system, what was that? You probably know. It was the government agency in charge of the Soviet network of forced labor camps set up by order of Lenin, reaching its peak during Stalin's rule from the 1930s to the early 50s. The Gulag, the HR department. During the later half of the 20th century, union membership declined significantly while workforce management continued to expand its influence within organizations. In the US, the phrase industrial and labor relations came into use to refer specifically to issues concerning collective representation, and many companies began referring to the proto-HR profession as personnel administration. Many current HR practices originated with the needs of companies in the 1950s to develop and retain talent. In the late 20th century, advances in transportation communications greatly facilitated workforce mobility and collaboration. Corporations began, read this is really telling. Corporations began viewing employees as assets, hence the name to human resources management. Corporations used to refer to employees as personnel and employees. In the 20th century, corporations began viewing employees as assets. Assets. That is distinctively dehumanizing language. Human resources management consequently became dominant term for the function, and the ASPA even changing its name to the Society for Human Resource Management in 1998. And now we have that the term is even going further. It's human capital management now, sometimes used synonymously with human resources. Human capital. It almost sounds like cattle. Human cattle. That's how we are viewed in our culture today, from government, through big business, and even now in our popular culture with whiteness. We are being dehumanized on every single side, folks. And you can bet the Bill Gates of the world, the George Soroses of the world, when they make their plans, you're just one of billions in their minds, just an ant on the ground. You're a human capital, a human resource, maybe an asset to be used of and disposed of at will. That's how you are viewed. That's how our culture has evolved to view us. And that is getting worse and worse as the time goes on. Now I've got some videos coming out to distinctly exactly about this that will be coming out soon. Now we're getting towards the end here. I've got one example to remind us of the of how much this dehumanizing of white people is affecting our culture. Here, a man in hate crime killing. This fellow, a black fellow, took his truck down the highway and saw a biker on his bike and literally ran headlong into him to kill him because he was white. This is the direct result of all of this dehumanizing language coming out of our universities, specifically in the terms of whiteness, white guilt, white privilege, from feminists, feminist professors. And I'll remind you again, Black Lives Matter is not a black group. It is a feminist group. It is a Marxist, socialist, revolutionary, Marxist, feminist group, not a black group. The name is just deceit. It is smoke and mirrors. Let's read about this here. Fond du Lac man charged in a homicide. I'm going to expand it a bit so you can read it easier. Charged in a homicide hate crime says he intentionally swerved his truck into a motorcyclist because he believed Harley riders to be white racists. This is racism right there, but it's not acknowledged as racism in our culture, and typically. Because in our culture, feminists have successfully created this illusion that only white people can be racist. According to information released by the county sheriff, this is. Let's read on. Navarro discussed recent events and the racial climate in the country. This is when he was talking to police. This is the culprit here. Navarro said, if President Donald Trump and white people are going to create the world we are living in, he has no choice and people are going to have to die. This sentiment is widespread now. This sentiment is now becoming socially acceptable and tolerated to not only speak of these things, but many in the Black Lives Matter movement will celebrate these events. We saw the video of the guy who was beaten unconscious at a Black Lives Matter protest because he defended a guy holding a flag of the US. He was beat out unconscious, and all the people around him laughed. They criticized him, they admonished him. They say, you can't protest against Black Lives Matter. This is accepted. It is being promoted in our culture as we speak. And it is just getting started, folks. The authorities have not even got the will together to start to oppose it, to start to call it what it is: thuggery, racism, bigotry. It is a war they're starting. The sheriff said, let's read on. Navarro told detectives that he believed the person driving the motorcycle was white because in Wisconsin, white people drive Harley-Davidson motorcycles, and the Harley culture was made up of white racists, he says. He admitted he could not specifically see who was driving this motorcycle. This is the kind of people who are fired up and fueled up by the rhetoric of hatred that is being tolerated and is being promoted by our government, by our education system, and by our media. These kinds of people are being fired up to do this kind of mindless murder, assuming that it's a white person that he's murdering. They're fired up by the support of the rhetoric given by our governments, by our education systems, by the professors in our universities, by the mainstream media who are enabling this. They're encouraging it. They're condoning it. And they're not reporting on the evil of this to the extent that they're reporting on everything that is favorable to the Black Lives Matter community. This is what we're up against in our culture today. He admitted he intentionally swerved into the path of the oncoming motorcycle with the intent to kill that operator. He chose a motorcycle instead of a car because he wanted the driver to die. This is murder, and not just be injured or paralyzed. This is the culture that is now upon us, that has descended upon us because of feminism, because of feminists in university, because of the mainstream media, because of the use of language to justify hatred. The word whiteness is the enemy, therefore white people are the target. A simpler, more direct cause cannot be found, and the guilty people are the feminists. Now, I'm going to take out one last item here, and this is this last item I'm going to talk about is the only sane, reasonable article on white privilege that I could find. I've only got a few quotes. I've got quite a lot of quotes, but the article is very long, and I'm going to highly recommend that you read the entire thing. The link is in the descriptions. The fallacy of white privilege and how it is corroding society. The title says it all. It is a fallacy, and it is corroding our society in incredible ways. The one thing that they don't say in the title nor in the article that I saw is that there are people who want this. It is not happening on its own. It's not an accident. This is by design. The Marxist feminists want this. They are pushing for this. The George Soroses who fund these groups, they want this. They want to corrode our society. They are ushering in their preferred Marxist society. And this was written July 11th, which would be yesterday. So let's have a look at a couple of quotes from this article. Reading from the top with me. Upon immigration from India when I was 4, my family suffered tremendous economic hardships and cultural challenges. My father drove a taxi at night, and my mom worked many menial jobs as a cook, house cleaner, barista, and motel cleaner. It's fair to say my family never had a success handed to them on a silver platter. But more than a decade post-immigration, we have found our footing in Western society, with my dad making nearly 6 figures. And he goes on to describe more of that family life. This is an article, I tell you, is really worth reading. Here's the fellow here. I think it was from Pakistan that he came from. Oh, no, sorry, India. He came from India. He suffered bullying in school because he wore this turban here. Here he is today as a young man writing this very well-written, well-reasoned, and courageous article. I'm going to have to praise him highly here because it takes courage to go against this stream right now. This stream is powerful. It is a brutal stream that he's fighting against, and he's putting his life at risk. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that somebody who comes out in a major journal and contradicts the Black Lives Matter narrative, I don't think it's a stretch to say he's putting his life at risk. Because he is. It doesn't matter what color your skin is. When you go against this narrative, you're putting your life at risk. Let's read what he says. I expand this a bit for you so you can read it with me. Reading from the top. Rising from poverty to economic prosperity is a common narrative for immigrants from all backgrounds in the West. For example, after the communist takeover of Cuba in 1959, many refugees fled to America, leaving most of their wealth behind and having to start from the bottom. But by 1990, second-generation Cuban Americans were twice as likely to earn an annual salary of $50,000 than non-Hispanic whites in the United States. And I know of many examples of this personally, of people from other countries coming to Canada and the US, and in the space of 10 or 20 years, becoming highly successful by working hard. This Black Lives Matter narrative is crap. This feminist narrative of its whiteness and white supremacy and oppression of white men on others in our culture is absolute crap, as is white privilege, as we're going to see. Reading from the top. Because of facts like these, an emerging definition of white privilege is now being widely circulated on social media. The facts are I didn't capture them here, but you can read it in the article. He says, white privilege doesn't mean your life hasn't been hard. It just means your race isn't one of the things that make it harder. These are some of the smoke screen, the kind of ways they try to defend their bigotry and hatred of white people. They're rationalizing it. They're giving themselves a plausible deniability with respect to their racist, bigoted ideas. Let's read from the top. And yet, this definition suffers from several shortcomings. For one, it ignores anti-Semitism, the second leading cause of hate crimes in America, according to the FBI. That is absolutely true. White privilege. If we have so much white privilege, why is there so much anti-Semitism? In addition, the growing demonization of whiteness now means that white people are no longer immune to racism. Can think of several instances, what does it say there? I can think of several instances where friends and colleagues have been racially targeted for being white and holding contrarian but intellectually defensible positions. Well, it's not just a growing demonization of white people. It's been here a long, long time. White people have never been immune to racism. He's suggesting here that this is a recent thing. No, Racism has been against everybody through all of humanity. I'll quibble with him on that point in this article. But overall, I think the article is one of the most brilliant, courageous articles on this topic available today. And it was printed just yesterday. Reading from the top. And the concept of white privilege can't explain why several historically marginalized groups outperform whites today. Take Japanese Americans, for example. For nearly 4 decades in the 20th century, 1913 to 1952, this group was legally prevented from owning land and property in over a dozen American states. And yet, but by 1959, the income disparity between Japanese Americans and white Americans nearly vanished in such a short period of time. Today, Japanese Americans outperform whites by large margins in income, statistics, education outcomes, test scores, and incarceration rates. This blows away this whole racist, bigoted idea of whiteness and white privilege. Let's read on. One could argue the successful stories of my family, Cuban Americans, and Japanese Americans are cherry-picked cases, but whites are far from being the most dominantly successful group in Western society. A wealth of data collected in a long-form Quillette analysis shows overwhelming white underachievement relative to several minority groups among health outcomes, educational achievement, incarceration rates, and economic success. Reading on in this article. This is a long article, so there's a lot more very good information in the article. Once again, I do recommend that you read it. Reading this from the top. According to median household income statistics from the U.S. Census Bureau, several minority groups substantially out-earn whites. These groups include Pakistani Americans, Lebanese Americans, South African Americans, Filipino Americans, Sri Lankan Americans, and Iranian Americans, in addition to several others. Indians, the group I belong to, he says, are the highest earning ethnic group the census keeps track of, with almost double the household median income of whites. Let that sink in. How does this white privilege work when we're so far down the list of ethnic success? How is it working? Apparently, we're not doing patriarchy and whiteness and white privilege right. We seem to be pushing other people up if we're to believe that this is a thing. Interestingly, several Black immigrant groups such as Nigerians, Barbadians, Ghanaians, and Trinidadians and Tobagonians have a median household income well above the American average. Ghanaian Americans, to take one example, earn more than several specific white groups such as Dutch Americans, French Americans, Polish Americans, British Americans, and Russian Americans. And this is the thing about these so-called academics in our universities. I keep repeating myself on this, but it bears repeating. They don't use facts. They just make a claim, and then they create this plausible deniability, like for example, calling whiteness not really about being white, incredible as it is. This is their plausible deniability for claiming not to be promoting racism, bigotry, and the violence that we're seeing today, but I'm not buying it. These racist, bigoted, socialist, Marxist feminists in the universities are responsible for the racism we're seeing today. And they call themselves academics, and they're paid the enormous salaries of university professors. And this young guy on his own, not a professor that I know of, can come up with this information easily. Anybody can, except, it seems, the people who are supposed to be able to do it. The academics, calling themselves academics. They're frauds. They're all frauds. We need to defund, I've said this before, get rid of everyone who works in the university and education system, and make them all reapply for their jobs, disqualifying all of the leftist Marxist frauds, examining their work. Let's carry on with this. Reading this from the top. In fact, because whites are the majority in Canada and America, more white people live in poverty or are incarcerated than any other racial group in those countries. If you are to randomly pick an impoverished individual in America, you are exponentially more likely to pick a white person than a person of color because of population differences. Today, 15.7 million white Americans, almost twice as many as black Americans, live in poverty. And this is because they've dehumanized us. It doesn't matter if a object, if a human resource, a human capital is suffering in poverty, especially if they are one of the demonized whiteness. They're responsible for the whole society so they can suffer in their poverty. That doesn't reach anyone because we've been dehumanized. And that, folks, is all that I have for today. I want to just reiterate one point that I said overall, because these academics, now, we shouldn't use the term because they're frauds. These pseudo-academics in our university systems. These are the people who are wailing about socially constructed this, socially constructed that. They're claiming that gender itself is socially constructed. And yet, all of that is smoke and mirrors while they socially construct institutionalized hatred and racism against white people. This is what they're doing with the language by calling it white guilt, white privilege, and then just whiteness. They are attaching all the evil things that happen in our culture to the fact that you are white. They are socially constructing institutionalized hatred of white people before our very eyes. And we are paying them enormous amounts of money to do it. They are succeeding for now. Don't let yourself be dehumanized. Don't kneel. Don't profess your sin of being white. Okay, sorry I was cut off here, lost power and lost internet. I think I'm back. Sorry about that, folks. There's nothing I can do about it here down in the Dominican Republic. Sometimes it happens. So I don't know where I left off at, but I will just remind you that they are socially constructing institutionalized hatred of and racism against white people as we speak. But I'm going to say, don't kneel. Don't apologize for guilt you don't have. Don't accept this claim that you have white privilege when you don't have it and you worked for everything you have in your life like I did. Don't accept this terminology of whiteness. Whiteness is a term that they are deceitfully creating to dehumanize you. So with that, I'm going to say, folks, do something you love every single day. Reject all this culture of hatred. Don't kneel. Don't accept this white guilt. Don't accept this white privilege bull crap. And don't accept whiteness. So do something you love today. I know I am going to. And I hope you join me again for another live stream, Coffee with Steve, this coming week. I don't know if it'll be Monday. I've got quite a few things to do Monday, but I hope you can join me on the next one. Good day now, and thanks for joining me.